It's your boy Luke here for our Sunday night football preview for Draftkings Showdown. We've got the Vikings at the Packers, a divisional matchup that is really going to have some serious playoff implications. A must-win for the Vikings. The Packers are trying to seal up that #1 seed in the NFC. And overall, we got a ton of DFS implications, whether it's for DraftKings, FanDuel, tons of contests to go ahead and try and take down. So let's hop right into it with our preview for Sunday night on primetime. On the screen here, you guys can see our Patreon projections. Of course, these are updated up until lock, so whether there's an injury that comes up, a crazy COVID situation, which is seemingly happening on every single slate these days, we'll have you covered with the latest updates. But let's go ahead and start with the game script, this being a relatively moderate scoring game. They're at a 46.5 point over-under, what you would expect in terms of a spread, with the Packers favored by a whole touchdown. And in reality, I do agree with both of those numbers there. I don't expect this to be a shootout, but you'll see some scoring for each side. You have elite playmakers, some solid defenses though, and overall I do expect this to be right about an average showdown slate. With the spread there, -7 Packers, I also agree with that type of number. While the Vikings have definitely had some fourth quarter crumbles, they've been in every single game this year. They hardly ever get blown out, so I'm really in lockstep there with what Vegas is thinking for this game. In terms of DFS, I definitely am trying to target more of the pass catchers here. So you guys can see, in terms of my captain exposureship, both quarterbacks there, obviously. A.J. Dillon, the one guy at running back I'm willing to try and get some exposure to, but a majority of that captain exposure will be at the wide receiver position. Obviously, you have two of the best wide receivers in the NFL, with Devontae Adams and Justin Jefferson in this primetime matchup, but also guys like a Marcus Valdes-Scantling, Allen Lazard, maybe even a KJ Osborne or D.D. Westbrook that could go out and have a ceiling type of performance. But let's go ahead and go position by position, going in detail why or why not I'll be playing some of these guys. And at the quarterback position, I don't think we need to overthink it. Both of these quarterbacks are prolific fantasy scorers, are going out there getting you plenty of yardage, touchdown production, and overall not many turnovers either. The one thing I will say here is that Aaron Rodgers is a little bit more expensive than at least I would hope that he'd be. I have him closer to $10,500 as terms of a target price, but at $11,200, maybe we'll get a little bit lower ownership on him than perhaps he should be. As of right now, I have him projected for 64.5% ownership, and as we get a little bit closer to lock, that is going to get more and more accurate. I could very well see that coming in closer to 50% because of that price tag. Just frankly, because there's so many good skill position players to try and roster in this game. I mean, you've already talked about these wide receivers. You have some stud running backs to try and roster as well. So fitting in both of these quarterbacks, not quite as easy as it can be on some of these other primetime slates. In terms of price tag, Kirk Cousins is definitely a lot more flexible there at $9,800. Definitely like his upside. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, seemingly much higher projected than a Kirk Cousins, but that 0.4 point difference and over a $1,400 price difference really makes that up. So Kirk Cousins, actually my favorite of the two plays, really comes down to the price tag. In terms of builds, you're also able to fit in an extra stud if you go to a Kirk Cousins. So we'll definitely have exposure to both quarterbacks. I'm probably only going to use them in the captain role if I'm running a 4 or a 5-to-1 level stack. I don't see them being optimal without 3 or 4 of those wide receivers catching a touchdown. So that's how I'll be dishing them out there at the captain position. Moving on to running back, I'm not as excited here. I do expect the Vikings to be playing from behind. That's really going to limit some of Dalvin Cook's upside. In terms of the Packers, they're also limited because they're in a timeshare at this point. A.J. Dillon has been fantastic to this point of the year, so much so that he's earned touches from Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones was somebody who was able to hold back Jamal Williams for all those years, and Jamal Williams is no slouch either. So that just shows you how much talent this A.J. Dillon guy has. He's clearly the future of their offense. So for me, it also limits that upside because both of them are going to get carries. We're not sure who's going to be that bell cow back, who's going to go and get that red zone touchdown. If I'm going to roster one of the two, definitely siding towards A.J. Dillon. He's there at $5,200, which actually makes him an excellent value play for this slate. He's also somebody who's going to benefit greatly if the Packers are playing from ahead. They've used him as their quote-unquote, run out the clock type of back. They're heavier back. They can run him up the middle. He's going to get you a lot of those yards after contact. Whereas Aaron Jones, more of a PPR level specialist, a little bit more shifty, that kind of thing. If it's a more competitive game, I could see Aaron Jones playing better. So if we're talking about some of our Viking stacks tonight, probably more willing to use an Aaron Jones. Whereas if I'm going with a Packers heavy stack, probably siding towards an A.J. Dillon. In terms of captain exposure, not huge on Dalvin Cook. I mean, he's one of the most popular captains on the slate, which I honestly get, but I'm a little bit siding towards these wide receivers, and we've already gone over why that's the case. But A.J. Dillon, if they get into one of those heavy Packers level scripts where they're playing from 14 points ahead or 21 points ahead, he could go out there, get you 20 fantasy points, and at a $5,200 price tag, that would be more than enough to be optimal at the captain position. Let's move on to wide receiver, where I'm going to have a ton of exposure tonight. I'm looking at rostering at least 2 to 3 of these guys in every single lineup, and the 2 guys up top, you can't go wrong with. Even though they're both chalk, the highest owned guys at the captain position, I'm willing to go ahead and eat that. Both of them have a true 25 to 30 point ceiling at the flex position, let alone at the captain position where they could throw up a 50 bomb. They're both expensive, $11,000, $10,800 respectively. Both are dealing with injuries though. With the Packers, you have Robert Tonyan out, guys like Randall Cobb that are out for the year as well. And while it doesn't seem like a massive impact, you're talking 20, maybe 25% target share right there that Davante Adams is eating a lot of. That's why we've seen some massive weeks from him. He's already the best wide receiver in the NFL, so we don't have to overthink it right here. He's capable of putting up a very solid performance and want to make sure that you have him in your player pool, and very extensively. He's a near lock for this slate. Speaking of locks, Justin Jefferson's also a near lock. It's going to be really hard to fit both of these guys into every single lineup and one of those quarterbacks, so you're going to kind of have to pick and choose 2 of the 4 that you really like. But I'm siding towards these wide receivers a little bit more than the quarterbacks, just because Justin Jefferson also dealing with the absence of Adam Thielen. That is a 30% target share right there, particularly in the red zone, where that increases to a 35% target share for Thielen. And without him in this offense, Justin Jefferson has been the 1, 2, and 3 options for this team. He's had some massive performances, a 40-plus fantasy point performance, and putting him at the captain slot, flex position, whatever you need to do with Justin Jefferson, you're going to go ahead and get some good production. So I like both of those guys up top. In terms of some of the middle tier guys, I'm okay rostering KJ Osborne. I don't really want to use him at the captain slot. He's not nearly getting enough targets to go ahead and pay that off, and that's even with Adam Thielen out of the lineup. You have plenty of a sample size to this point, and even though he has seen an uptick in production, it hasn't been quite as drastic as somebody like a Justin Jefferson. Marquez Valdes-Scantling and Allen Lazard, they're interesting options for the Packers. Because we do expect them to win this game, it is more than likely that the middle tier wide receivers from that team go out and pay off their price tag. I like using them both at the captain slot. They come in at really flexible price tags. If you end up using any of these middle tier wide receivers at the captain slot, you can fit in both quarterbacks. You can go to 2 of those stud wide receivers if you want to, and still make a relatively balanced build. So that's really the main selling point of going to these guys. The clear upside, though, with 40, maybe even 50 plus fantasy points, is with those guys up top, though. So don't get me wrong, I definitely like these guys in the middle tier, but you're looking at 60 to 70% of my captain exposure going to these 2 guys up top. In terms of pure punt plays or value plays, D.D. Westbrook is going to see plenty of snaps for this Vikings team. Right around 40 to 50% of snaps is what he's seen over these last 2 weeks with Thielen out of the lineup. He hasn't had tons of production, hasn't really been able to cash in on that snap share, but he's at least going to be seeing the field. Equanimeous St. Brown hasn't really been seeing the field. He's the number 4 wide receiver option for this team. So that's why you see me siding towards D.D. Westbrook, even at twice the price. He's at the very least going to have a secure snap load. Equanimeous St. Brown, he does see snaps for this Packers team, but it's in the 15 to 20% mark. So not anything that we can really count on there. So that's why I see myself siding towards the Vikings player. In terms of the pure punt plays, I want no exposure there. $200 a piece, not really seeing any snaps here. You're looking at a pure Hail Mary play. Maybe if you're playing 150 lineups, you can go ahead and roster one of those 2 guys, but I'm going to be sticking to a 20 max for Sunday Night Football, so those guys aren't going to be priorities for me. Moving on to tight end, we do have Tyler Conklin still as questionable. I should go ahead and note that Aaron Jones is technically questionable to this point, but he has been for the last month, and he's played through that injury, has not been that limited, so not really worried about Aaron Jones' availability. On the other hand, though, Tyler Conklin, more truly questionable for this affair. So if he ends up being out, Chris Herndon would be a huge beneficiary. turned into somebody who has a lot of talent. We saw him over on the New York Jets for all of those years, and if anybody can put up numbers, especially for the New York Jets, you know they at the very least have some talent there. And even though he hasn't gotten many snaps for this Vikings team, if he gets snaps in the red zone, particularly as a wide receiver, he could very well put up some fantasy points. The reason why he hasn't seen many snaps for this Vikings team is the blocking. He just cannot be trusted. He's one of the worst blocking tight ends in all of the NFL. But when it comes to his wide receiver acumen, is excellent. So at $2,400, it's really injury dependent right there. You can see he's not in my player pool as of right now, but if Tyler Conklin is rolled out, he becomes a slam dunk value play. Moving on to Josiah DeGuara, he's going to be the #1 tight end for this team. Mercedes Lewis rolled out with COVID. They already have Robert Tonyan out for the year, which means DeGuara's essentially the only tight end left on this team. Dominic Daphne, he is technically a tight end on Draftkings, but more of a fullback role for this team in reality. So DeGuara going to see all the red zone usage, all of the snaps outside of the red zone as well. So at $3,000, really do like him here on the slate. He does lack the top end upside for the captain position though, so not like I love him enough to put him there, but very good value. Somebody who in plenty of my Packers heavy stacks will be a prominent part. Moving on to the defense and special teams here. The defenses I'm not thrilled about. I mean, you're talking about a middling score, and really we're trying to target defenses when we have a total in the mid-30s. Maybe we have some turnover-prone quarterbacks, that kind of thing, but that's not the case here with Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers. We have two of the most efficient offenses in all of the NFL. So for that reason, kind of caps the upside of both of these guys. If you're really looking to play 150 lineups, that kind of thing, of course, go ahead and play a little bit of exposure to these defenses. But if you're single max entering, if you're 20 max, that kind of thing, I wouldn't make them a priority in your pool. In terms of the kickers, I'm always willing to go out and match the field on them. They're never somebody that I'm looking to get over the field on. There's only a few circumstances where that's even a consideration for me. And here in a game where we have a 46.5 point over-under, that's not something I'm looking to do. So Mason Crosby, Greg Joseph, as of right now, projected for right around 20% ownership apiece, and that's where I'll end up finding them in my pool. Maybe I'll have Mason Crosby at right around 30% just because they are the favored team here, but not going to go crazy in either circumstance. That is all I've got for the Sunday Night Football preview. Thank you guys for stopping by as always. Go ahead and let me know down in the comments who you guys have as your favorite captain play. Maybe it's one of those stud wide receivers in Adams or Jefferson, or maybe it's somebody I wasn't even considering in my player pool. I always love to hear from you guys, so make sure to go ahead and let me know down in the comments. We're going to have even more NFL content coming throughout the week, whether it's for the main slate. For week 18, we're going to have you covered for a full slate of content. And of course, we have golf starting next week. So anybody out there that also plays golf DFS, make sure to look forward to that. And that is my #1 sport here on the channel, where I spend a lot of my time. We do full course breakdowns, DK picks, everything you need to know, whether it's for Showdown or the main slate, over for the Tournament of Champions. We're going to have you covered as well. So until next time, guys, good luck with all of your lineups for Sunday Night Football, and let's get this cash.